And on the wrap tonight, we've got a deal with Iran. Well, sort of. We'll show you what we mean. Also, Indiana's governor is facing serious backlash from social conservatives over changes coming to his state's religious freedom law. Should he have bowed to the pressure? Scores of students on a college campus in Kenya murdered today by an Islamic terror group, their crime being Christian. Also, Secretary of State John Kerry refuses to give up on a nuclear agreement with Iran. Is vanity the reason? This is the Daily Wrap. Welcome to the show, everybody. I'm Joe Concha with the man who used an Enigma machine to crack German codes in World War II, thereby turning the tide against the Nazis and providing the freedom we enjoy today. My hero, my co-host, Rick Unger.
Did you see my movie?
You were well, whoever portrayed you was outstanding. The computers didn't even exist then to be able to do that. Also joining us, the woman many inside the Beltway are calling Carly Fiorina's top choice as a running mate if and when she runs. What an honor. Heather Hansen looking well and
Good
bright.
To be here. Bright, yes.
Yes, for a bright sunny day here in New York. And the founder of the Wisdom Daily and former spiritual advisor to Anthony Weiner. Who knew?
Not me.
Oh, boy.
Not yet, Rabbi.
You weren't aware either?
You
wouldn't
so
have done
much
that
in
if
the
I
intro.
had, I promise.
Okay, let's go to the Daily Download. And today, President Obama announcing that Secretary of State John Kerry and other major world powers have agreed to a framework deal with Iran.
Today, after many months of tough, principled diplomacy, we have achieved the framework for that deal. And it is a good deal, a deal that meets our core objectives. This framework would cut off every pathway that Iran could take to develop a nuclear weapon.
The president saying the deal is not based on trust.
So this deal is not based on trust. It's based on unprecedented verification.
He then spilled out some of the deal's points.
First, Iran will not be able to pursue a bomb using plutonium because it will not develop weapons-grade plutonium. The core of its reactor at Arak will be dismantled and replaced. The spent fuel from that facility will be shipped out of Iran for the life of the reactor. Iran will not build a new heavy water reactor, and Iran will not reprocess fuel from its existing reactors, ever.
And there's more.
Second, this deal shuts down Iran's path to a bomb using enriched uranium. Iran has agreed that its installed centrifuges will be reduced by 2/3. Iran will no longer enrich uranium at its Fordo facility. Iran will not enrich uranium with its advanced centrifuges for at least the next 10 years. The vast majority of Iran's stockpile of enriched uranium will be neutralized.
Seems the president has a lot of faith in Iran.
Iran has agreed that it will not stockpile the materials needed to build a weapon, even if it violated the deal. For the next decade at least, Iran would be a minimum of a year away from acquiring enough material for a bomb. And the strict limitations on Iran's stockpile will last for 15 years.
And finally, the commander-in-chief appearing to place ample trust in international inspectors.
International inspectors will have unprecedented access not only to Iranian nuclear facilities, but to the entire supply chain that supports Iran's nuclear program, from uranium mills that provide the raw materials to the centrifuge production and storage facilities that support the program. If Iran cheats, the world will know it.
Okay, so let's bring in former FBI special agent and former Navy SEAL and founder of U.S. Continued Services, Jonathan Gilliam, joins us. Jonathan, it seems like the president is showing a lot of trust in Iran. What did you make of this announcement?
I'm actually just speechless. I mean, everything is a promise by Iran, and it just makes no sense. I mean, I've never heard of negotiations with a crazy, manipulative, maniacal, administration such as Iran, where it sounds like something out of a movie. You know, like when the Terminator came here and he said, "I swear I will not kill anybody." and the kid just took his word for it. I mean, it's the most craziest thing I've ever heard, and it just goes to show you that this administration, I've always said you can measure what they're really good at because they're really good at it. That's running for office, probably better than anybody. But you can take that same measurement of expertise and professionalism and apply it to the other things that they do, such as going to sitting at the table to talk about nuclear power with a crazy Islamic country like Iran, and it's a complete failure. I mean, I have no idea how he plans to have all these things monitored and carried out. And the other thing I heard is in 15 years, they will then be able to possibly get a bomb. So basically, he's, again, pushing it all off on the next generation.
And just to correct you, and you're bigger than me, so I don't like doing this very often. That was Terminator 2 with the kid, not Terminator, just so you know. But in all seriousness, I'm going to let Rick ask a question.
Hey, Jonathan, I heard the word crazy quite a bit. I wonder if it's a great idea to go into a discussion or to approach any nation in the world by expecting that they're crazy. My suggestion would be they're not so crazy. They know exactly what they're doing. We may not like what they do. We may not agree with their religious precepts or whatever the case may be. But my suspicion is if they're crazy like a fox. So where that gets us is the real problem, let's put it this way. If you knew for a certainty, and I know you don't, but if you knew for a certainty that we could verify all the things that are in that agreement, would you start to like it a little bit better?
No.
Why?
I'll tell you why. Because when I say crazy, okay, I understand what you're saying, crazy like a fox, but the reality is, Rick, this is a administration of Iran, and the religious leaders of Iran say that they want to wipe Israel off the earth. They've said before, the previous Ahmadinejad, the previous leader of Iran, political leader, said that he didn't even believe in the Holocaust. So, yes, crazy like a fox, but also crazy. They belong to fundamental Islam, the same movement that you see ISIS carrying out. They're just from a different sect, Sharia and Sunni. As soon as one eliminates the other, they're going to continue to try to have global domination. That's what's happening here.
Yep, and we see that all across the world right now, this almost world war that's spreading to all these different countries between the Shia and the Sunni. Jonathan, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate your input.
Got it.
And coming up next, more on today's deal with Iran. This is the Daily Wrap, and it's only on Newsmax TV.
We will continue enriching. We will continue research and development. Our heavy water reactor will be modernized, and we will continue the Fordo facility. We will have, as you will hear, centrifuges installed in Fordo, but not enriching. We will remain committed to the agreement, and we will not enrich in Fordo. We will continue, we will focus our enrichment in Natanz, and we will do other activities while keeping our centrifuges in Fordo for a time that we have agreed.
Well, what could possibly go wrong? Well, welcome back to the Daily Wrap. That was Iranian Foreign Minister Javad Zarif going over some of the points of today's deal with Iran. Don't know about you, but when I hear him say he will continue to enrich uranium, it's kind of important, right? That's like telling an alcoholic he can keep that Budweiser kegerator fully stocked in the kitchen. Don't worry, I'm sure you're not going to use it for anything. Okay, so what is the United States giving up exactly?
At the same time, all Security Council resolutions will be terminated. All U.S. nuclear-related secondary sanctions, as well as EU sanctions, will be terminated, while the term of art for each case may be terminate implementation or cease implementation or terminate application, whatever the word may be, so that people will not get into trouble with their legal institutions. But the effect of which would be when we implement our measures, there won't be no sanctions.
No sanctions. Okay, Heather. So I've read that this is a near complete capitulation by the Obama administration. Do you agree with that assessment?
I think it's really, as many times as I've read it and as many times I've read about it this afternoon, it's not clear to me when these sanctions will be lifted, whether they're lifted immediately upon signing the agreement or whether they're lifted after there's been some inspection. So that's a first concern that I have. But my bigger concern is the snapback idea. Because one of the things that President Obama said today is we can snap back sanctions if they violate the agreement. Now, I think most of us have that concern that they very well may violate the agreement. But Russia has always expressed a reluctance to snap back provisions of sanctions. They have always said that they wanted it to be subject to a vote. So now we're talking about they violate the agreement and we can't snap back sanctions for months, maybe years, while they continue to just do whatever it is that they want to do. That has not been addressed. So I think when you've got a lack of trust, you need to be sure that you have verification and consequences for violations. And I don't think that that's included in what we heard today.
Brad?
Yeah, I think that's the key. Remember Reagan's line, trust but verify. If we're real robust on the trust building measures but not equally robust on the verification measures, then there either isn't going to be a deal or there better not be a deal. I mean, already if you listened to Zarif when he said the UN Security Council sanctions will be lifted immediately, that's actually not what's even they're publishing, and the administration is trying to sell the heck out of this deal. What it says is that upon compliance, the US-EU sanctions will be lifted. Lord knows how you verify compliance. We have no language on that. That is troubling. And I hope there is a deal, but there's no language on that, and does not say anything about the UN. That may actually be leverage, because when this goes to the UN, remember, there's an entire Sunni Muslim world that can't stand these guys, that doesn't trust these guys. The king of Saudi Arabia, King Salman, was busy all afternoon tweeting. I don't picture him simply tweeting himself from the palace, but maybe. So tweeting, do not trust Iran. Now, I'm not saying yes or no, but I am saying there's a lot of stuff in play, and I'm hoping that someone is, with great sophistication, measuring out the possibility of US-EU sanctions being lifted and keeping other ones in place. But again, we don't know, and that for me is the troubling thing here. What we don't know is much more than we do.
Rick, I want to talk about the political aspects of this for a moment. So let's say a Republican gets into the White House in 2016 and he runs on a platform saying, I don't like this deal, it gives away the store too much, we can't verify everything, and the Iranians are already backing off their deal. Is that something that is, you think, of a concern to the Iranians at all? Because we've already threatened that from...
There's already a candidate who said precisely that,
Scott
Walker,
right.
Which, I know we all know I'm not a big fan of Scott Walker, but what a ridiculous thing to say. One of the problems that we're going to have here, and by the way, I'm not going to comment much on this deal because it's about an hour and a half old, and I want to hear from some experts. I'm tired of everybody adopting their negative approach or their positive approach. I'd like to be realistic in the approach, and we're not getting that. I love Jonathan, but to be that negative without really knowing what's going on I don't think that's healthy for the American people. So, and Jonathan can respond to that. So yes, we've already heard from Senator Kirk from Illinois, who says that this deal is worse than Hitler and Chamberlain. And then we've heard from Senator Feinstein, the Democrat, who's been very supportive of the deal. So they're all going to play politics, and that's a real shame for the American people, both sides. Leave the politics out. Tell us what this means and what it means to us, and let's not rush to judgment because we all have a lot to learn.
And to that end, it's important that Congress have a say.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the next step that we're
one.
not sure on either.
Right.
We don't have a real understanding of that.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Jonathan, how hard is it going to be for our inspectors, and I don't know if this is exactly in your jurisdiction, but you know about secret military bases and underground capabilities and so on. Can we really ever truly verify that the Iranians have stopped doing what they're promising to stop doing?
I don't think so, because the nature of the way they're doing it is covert and underground, and that's been the problem all along, is that it's very difficult to monitor what they're doing, because it's not, as we've sanctioned them and closed them off, they've taken advantage of that and kind of gone underground, quote unquote underground, with their capabilities and what exactly they're doing. And I'll just say this one thing with Rick in mind. What I like about Rick Unger is that you can tell him something and he'll take the politics out of it, weigh it, and see if it's correct. And I'll just say this, Rick, take this home with you. I look at things, and this from an operational standpoint. Right. Politics out of this. Right. This was a bad deal from the start, because these guys are bad from the get-go. They have no good intentions, and to get close to a nuclear bomb is dangerous, if not deadly.
I agree, but how do we know that they're not ready to do this? I understand you're being suspicious, and I think you're absolutely right to be suspicious. I get that 150%. They've earned your suspicion. But sooner or later, it's going to occur to them that it's in their best interest, too, to do this. I don't know if this is the time that it's happened, and I agree with every one of you. We won't know anything until we see how verification works. But if we can't sit down with them because we mistrust and hate them, we never get anywhere.
Brad, you had a quick question.
Yeah,
John, we only have about 10 seconds.
Jonathan, real quick, is the place of national pride in this, right? In other words, this is a culture that wants to be acknowledged throughout the world. Is there any way to play that with them?
No. And the fact is, you're looking at a bigger group that has the same mindset as ISIS.
Yep. John, thanks so much. We appreciate it, and for coming back for us as well after I kicked you out after the last segment. Anyway, we're talking Indiana next. This is the Daily Wrap, only on Newsmax. And welcome back to the show. Let's go back to the Hoosier State, where state leaders of Congress, both Republicans, mind you, announcing today a quote-unquote fix to this religious freedom law we've been hearing so much about this week, and this would prevent businesses from denying services to gays or lesbians. Here is Indiana Speaker of the House, Brian Bosma.
What was intended as a message of inclusion of all religious beliefs, was interpreted as a message of exclusion, especially for the LGBT community. Nothing could have been truer or further from the truth, but it was clear that the perception had to be addressed.
Well, some social conservatives thought it did not have to be addressed, but I digress.
We're pleased to tell you today that at 9:30 we'll be presenting what we believe is a very strong statement to assure that every Hoosier's rights are protected and won't be infringed upon by the enactment of RFRA.
Now, pressure from the LGBT community, as well as some in the business community and even other state governors, led the walkback of the law. But in its wake, some businesses in Indiana feel their rights have been violated.
If a gay couple was to come in, like say they wanted us to provide them pizzas for a wedding, we would have to say no.
But Memory's pizza owner, Crystal O'Connor, who you just saw, doesn't believe she is discriminating against gays.
We're not discriminating against anyone. It's just that's our belief. And everybody has the right to believe anything.
Okay, so the owner of the shop did say that she would never refuse service to a gay couple. They just wouldn't cater a gay wedding. Who has their wedding catered by a pizza shop anyway? Because it's genius, Brad. They're always serving the chicken and the bad fish and steak, but it's really a flank steak, and that's what
You never get a craving for a piece of chicken.
That's
Pizza,
right.
I understand. So if I had to go back and do it again 26 years maybe, I want to ask a serious
Not
question
for
though here,
memories.
because we all laughed. Is it possible that a person in good conscience really can say, of course I would serve a gay couple. They can come in holding hands, they can kiss in the booth, I would serve them. But I don't want to participate
Completely
in their
possible.
wedding.
Absolutely, it's possible.
And we are no closer on either side to being able to appreciate that. We throw around words like include and exclude and rights and that. She can't even say, you're right, I am discriminating. Including my views will necessarily exclude others. How are we going to work that out in this country?
This is what has made this issue so compelling and so interesting for so long now. Both sides of this argument are right.
Yes.
Exactly.
They are both right. Nobody should be discriminated against, and nobody should have their religious beliefs compromised. Both sides are right. So what do you do when both sides are right?
There's two things about that. One is I went back last night and looked at some of the Supreme Court cases on this, and they do differentiate between belief and action. So you can have your belief, but when you take action that infringes on other people's rights, you lose.
No, I
So that's-
understand, but that doesn't change. You're right, but it doesn't
But
change
it
the
still
reality.
leaves us with the bind
with the
that
problem,
we're trying to
with the
cover
problem.
multiply
It doesn't make you a bad
conflicting
person
needs.
if
But
you have
they-
a religious belief.
They
You know, it
sort
doesn't-
they sort of did it in Utah. So in Utah, they were going to pass a similar law, and then they got together, and the Church of the Jesus Christ of the Latter-day Saints
Yeah.
sat down with members of the LGBT.
We call them Mormons.
Yes,
Yes.
sat down with the members of the LGBT community, and they talked, and they negotiated, and they came up with a deal that both protects
Right.
the discrimination and makes
a
religious
novel
accommodations.
concept.
And that's the key. We've
What a
got to
novel
have conversation ahead of legislation. If we don't, we're just going to get pointless, expensive, mean-spirited litigation.
And here's where the conversation has gone in the case of that particular pizza place. That woman has received death threats, multiple, on social media, people calling the pizza place. God forbid, pun intended, you actually disagree in this case and you're just exercising your religious beliefs, because if you do, the mob will come after you, and it is the mob.
Absolutely. The sanctimony of the people who oppose her is no less intense than what she's being accused of. That's the irony here. We've got two sides that talk with absolute certainty about what by definition no one can be certain about. If we could bring back a little humility, which last time I checked is a serious religious principle, no matter you're a progressive or traditionalist, it's a serious religious category. How do you do advocacy? How do you have passionate views and still have a little humility?
And I'm gonna throw in one more thing, and I've largely taken the side of the LGBT community in this, but they have advanced as they should have advanced, and they've advanced because they asked for and they're getting tolerance, which they clearly deserve. Well, when you're getting tolerance, why don't you express a little
Reciprocate.
tolerance?
Right,
You know?
right. Yeah, I think that they feel that they're in a position that they can't afford to, and I think that's
I
wrong.
think that's right.
But I think that's wrong.
I wonder how much of this is, I know how much of this is political. Know what I got a kick out of? Andrew Cuomo, the Democratic New York State governor, who says, I'm banning all non-essential travel to Indiana. So let's say I went to Duke, and that would never happen, but let's say I went to Duke and I wanted to see the Final Four this weekend in Indianapolis.
That's essential.
That's essential?
That's redefining essential. So that you can go.
Right.
But you're right. All these bannings
you're not a
back and
state worker.
forth, you punish people, you have no idea who you're punishing. It's posturing, and posturing with other people's lives is a very bad practice.
Agreed. I'm sorry, Rick, you were saying?
I said you're not a state employee, so Andrew Cuomo couldn't tell you and I that we can't go.
Right, but even state employees
I know,
that may have
I
gone to Kentucky or whatever, just the exploitation.
We'll
is
get emails.
disgusting.
Andrew
We
Cuomo's
will.
a dictator.
Potluck time next. This is the Daily Wrap, only on Newsmax. Welcome back to the Daily Wrap. It's potluck time. This is the part of the show where we go around the table and share our favorite stories of the day. Heather Hansen wearing coral, I'm going to call it. All right, Brad just called it.
Thank you.
We just had a discussion about what color my shirt is, my dress is.
You're looking well.
Coral
What are you
works.
serving
Thank
up?
you. So in Texas, there's a bill that is pending that is similar to a bill that passed in Florida but is now caught up in the legal process. And this involves whether or not doctors can put in their medical records whether a patient has a gun. So they're trying to make it illegal for a doctor to put it in the medical records whether or not a patient has a gun. And they did so in Florida. It was called Docs versus Glocks, because the doctors were all up in arms about this, and they wanted to be able to have these conversations with their patients. They wanted to be able to put it in the medical record if they felt it was relevant, and they felt it infringed on their First Amendment rights. The court said it does not infringe on your First Amendment rights, and you cannot put that information in there. What I'm not sure about is why it's relevant. I do. The doctor's position is that it is a risk to children in the house. It's a risk to the people in the house. But so is drunk driving. And in fact, more people die from drunk driving. Right. And you don't ask someone, do you drink and drive?
What kind of car do you have?
Right, exactly.
I can think of one circumstance where it might be, and that's if it's a mental health issue. Right? But short of a mental health issue, then you're actually using your position as a doc to legislate people's lives, which will also erode the trust between physicians and their patients. And that's a very bad, whatever short-term gain that makes on gun safety, it's going to be a real long-term problem.
They'd be better getting a full accounting of the toys in the house, because they're more
choking
dangerous.
That's true.
hazards.
Poisoning is
Right.
that is true.
Where do you keep your liquid plumber?
I do understand doctors' position that legislation shouldn't be in my examining room. You shouldn't start telling me what I can and cannot ask. But I also think that it's none of your business. And I think that if a doctor asks that, the response would be none of your business.
Well, that's up to the patient.
Well, right. But to start to legislate what goes in the examining room, I do understand the doctor's concerns. That's what I do every day. I work with doctors, I defend doctors, and so I understand the concerns. But here I just think it's such an overreach. And I think that the people who are concerned about the Second Amendment and the infringements on that right have a right to say this is enough is enough. You're not gonna
Doctors
ask
need to
me those
investigate
questions.
in a lot of situations, and primarily with my wife's an ER doctor, and drug seekers come in all the time, and they have those stomach ailments that you can't quite track. Right. And it's the same people coming in all the time. And after a while, she has to say, no, you're not getting what you're coming here for, or you have a drug problem and you need to check in somewhere.
Right.
And sometimes, is that stepping over the line? I know this is different, but
that's medical.
That's part of your body. That is something you're ingesting. This is a way of life. It is a lifestyle choice.
That's
and
for
it's the
doing
same
your
thing
job.
as like drinking and driving. It's
Right.
something that you're doing outside of the body. And I think that while doctors have maybe in the right intentions, it's none of their business.
I agree. And your wife's just doing her job when
Yeah.
she does that.
Exactly.
She's not, snooping or anything else.
Well-
She's trying to keep you healthy. It's your body.
Right. The drug seeker example was probably a bad
Yeah, I mean,
one.
if
But
someone
sometimes she
comes
has
in-
to ask questions that make people uncomfortable.
Yeah.
They may seem personal, but that's the only way she could extract
Right.
information.
If someone comes in with a bullet wound, you're going to ask, were you shot?
Right.
I mean, there's a good time where it's actually
Right.
relevant. Most of the time, not so much.
I don't know if she asked that when she gets the bullet wound. So where'd this little nick
Got
come
a
from?
pretty good idea that
This is
somebody
looking
was
like
shot.
you might have had a gun in the house.
Well,
no.
speaking of personal questions and bullet wounds,
Nice segue,
Yeah, look at
Brad.
that.
Garissa University, this is a bitter cup I'm serving tonight. 147 people murdered simply because they're Christian. And it was with questions. The murderers went door to door in a dorm, and they asked people, can you recite verses from the Quran? And if they couldn't, they were shot where they stood. Now, at some point, the rising tide of genocidal hate toward Christians, especially in Africa and in the Middle East, has got to be addressed. We talked before about Indiana and religion and religious rights and respect. Wouldn't it be interesting if between now, at least through Easter Sunday, whether you're progressive or traditionalist, Christian, Muslim, Jewish, atheist, I don't care, we decide that actually that has got to stop. We've got to rise beyond the differences of what you interpret for pizza and not for pizza and gay marriage and not gay marriage. Understand, if there are people working through hallways saying, can you recite from the Quran, and if not, you're dead, simply because you're Christian, that's a bigger problem than most of the stuff we're losing sleep over, and we better mobilize around it, or we will live to regret it.
I guess the question is, how do you do that? Is it sending ground troops into... Obviously, we're all in agreement that something has to be done, that this is a Christian genocide that we're witnessing. But how do... What kind of sacrifice... Well, I just want to see is a shared sacrifice. We've talked about this in this show before. Right. That if all the nations of the world, the civilized ones anyway, gave up 5,000 troops, and you add all those numbers up, and then before you know it, you could wipe out these people. But no one seems to want to address it.
No one seems to want to until it's too late. And what we know from history is it will get to be too late. And God help us if that happens. Is that troops? Maybe. But imagine if right now everyone who's upset about it simply said, whatever else we're fighting about in the name of religion, we're going to come together. Just 72 hours, because they're doing it on purpose. They know it's Holy Week, and there's a tradition of doing that. The way the Nazis exploited Jewish festivals, they're exploiting Holy Week. Stop it.
And we'll have to end on that note. Very, very well said, Brad. Thank you. And we'll have to take a quick break, but don't worry. When we come back, I'll have even more potluck, including my own and Mr. Unger's. This is The Daily Wrap, and it's only on Newsmax TV.
Attention homeowners.
And welcome back to Daily Wrap. I'm your host, Joe Conchin. If you're just joining us, we're in the middle of our potluck, where we're sharing our favorite stories of the day. Rick Unger, what do you got for us tonight?
Well, tonight's is under the heading of how do you solve a problem like Senator Tom Cotton? Now, you'll remember that Senator Cotton was the ringleader who wrote the letter that was sent to the Iranian government telling them exactly how they felt about the deal that our president was negotiating with them. Now, last night, Senator Cotton was on Wolf Blitzer over at CNN, and he basically had a message for the gay people in America, which is, you think you got it bad here, relax, because you could be living in Iran. Let's show that clip.
Well, Wolf, in Arkansas, we believe in religious freedom. That's one reason why our...
Well, everybody believes in religious freedom.
That's one reason why our...
But the question is the discrimination, potential discrimination against gay Americans.
The Religious Freedom Restoration Act was signed by former Arkansas Governor Bill Clinton in his first year in office. These laws are modeled on that, and a lot of the concerns about discrimination haven't been borne to bear over the last 20 years. But I also think it's important that we have a sense of perspective about our priorities. In Iran, they hang you for the crime of being gay. They're currently imprisoning an American preacher for spreading the gospel of Jesus Christ in Iran. We should focus on the most important priorities that our country faces right now. And I would say that a nuclear-armed Iran, given the threat that it poses to the region and to our interest in the region and American citizens, is the most important thing that we be focused on.
All right, so did Governor Hutchinson...
So in Iran, they hang you if you're gay. And to Senator Cotton, that's a good enough reason that gay Americans should just chill out on their rights, because it could be worse. They could be in Iran. You know what, Senator Cotton? If you had sent your letter, if you were a senator in Iran, you know what would happen? If you had gone against your government there, you'd be hanging by your thumbs inside of a freezer somewhere. So you know what? Don't worry so much about Barack Obama, Senator Cotton. It could be worse. You could be serving in a legislature in Iran.
That's powerful stuff, because he is watching tonight. I understand from his Twitter feed.
I'm sure he's...
Cotton or the
Enjoy your
president or
dinner.
Iran?
Both, of course.
Yeah, we're worldwide DirecTV.
Yeah.
Clearly.
I mean, you know, he just makes the issue sound ridiculous.
He's an idiot.
It really is. It's not a fair conversation. There's so many issues we talked about them, about weighing, and then for him to say something like that is really just taking the gravity of the situation completely away.
Being better than the worst version of your enemy
Yeah.
is an easy game to play.
Yeah.
But a teacher of mine a long time ago said, if you try and compare your best to someone else's worst, you'll always win, but you won't be very good.
Right.
And that's what he did there.
Yeah.
Well said. Anything else you want to say to this?
I think he got the message.
Okay. Boy,
Over his dinner.
it really is tough to be a freshman.
Gosh.
Anyway, speaking of freshmen, going to talk about a veteran now, a veteran of Hollywood, a veteran of the comedy scene. And I love his work for the most part. Liked him in Dogma. I saw him at stand-up one time. Chris Rock we're talking about. Chris Rock of Bergen County, New Jersey, where I live as well. Well, Mr. Rock has been getting pulled over lately, as in 3 times in the past 2 months. And what he's been doing is actually documenting each time he gets pulled over with a selfie. And it's not like he's smiling like he is in these pictures that you're seeing. Here we go. It's a little bit more serious. And all he says during all of these tweets is, stop by the cops again, or stop by the police, wish me luck. And that's the extent of it. So what happens from here? Ooh, the media, they get really giddy. They say, wow, look what Chris Rock's doing. He's actually documenting every time he's getting pulled over to show that he's being picked on by the police, is basically the implication, or being profiled, even worse, because he's not providing any background as to why he's getting pulled over. So I write columns. I'm also what I consider a decent journalist. So I decided to look at the history of Mr. Rock on the road, and it's ugly. He has been arrested, not ticketed, arrested 3 times for vehicular violations. He also even was arrested for a vehicular assault on a youth that he said robbed him. In other words, you're going to take my wallet, I'm going to run you over. And driving with a suspended license as well, which, yes, I've done, all right, because you get the ticket and it goes to the wrong place, you don't pay the ticket, and then, okay, so that we're willing to forgive.
We're not the judge, you don't have to explain.
Okay. The point is, could it be that Mr. Rock was not pulled over because he's black? Because if you see those pictures, 2 are in the dark of night where you can't see anybody who's behind a wheel, but because maybe he ran a red light, had a tail light out, maybe he was speeding. I believe he owns a Lamborghini and a Porsche, and if I got those cars, I'm probably going to speed too. And instead, the media gets up and runs with this and says, this shows racial profiling. They actually say, boy, this is genius that Chris Rock is doing this, and no one bothers, except for me, of course, to check his driving record in the past. Now, that doesn't mean that he was speeding in these situations, but you guys are lawyers. If somebody has a history of doing this stuff, probably means he's going to do it again quickly.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's no context, and that's what you called him out on. You need to provide the context, and without it, all these people are jumping to conclusions, and that doesn't help anybody. We've seen that way too much about way too many things recently.
Yeah. Now, of course, you could also argue, and I'm not, but you could argue that in terms of context, maybe when he was arrested, he was being harassed because he was black.
4 times.
I'm not saying that's the case.
Yeah,
like
1, 2,
I
3,
said,
4,
I'm
5.
not arguing it. I'm just saying.
And that's our last word on that. Anyway, we come back. It's yay or nay. This is the Daily Wrap, only on Newsmax. And welcome back to Yay or Nay in the Daily Wrap. Well, first up, as you can hear, that's All or Nothing at All by Frank Sinatra. And he would have been 100 years young this year. Hard to believe he did that legendary gig at the Sands with Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr., and Rick Unger just 40 years ago.
Rat Pack, baby, forever.
That's right. And now HBO is celebrating his centennial with a two-part documentary, All or Nothing at All. That's airing on Sunday and Monday night. But a look at the late singer's life would not be complete without examining his family, specifically his alleged son, MSNBC's Ronan Farrow. Yes, there's been a lot of debate over the past couple of years over Farrow's paternity after his mother let it slip back in 2013 that Woody Allen might not be his father. Well, according to Sinatra's daughter, Tina, one of his daughters, the Hoboken-born legend is definitely not Ronan's father. Again, not Ronan's father because he had, get this, a vasectomy years before. So we have a photo lineup of the three gentlemen. You be the judge, everybody. Now, do you think the kid in the middle belongs to the guy on the left or the guy on the right? Because I'm seeing a resemblance between door number 1 and door number 2. Yeah. So, anyway, it should be known, by the way, vasectomies are not always permanent. So are you guys buying Tina Sinatra's claim that Ronan Farrow is not Frank's son after seeing that picture?
I have 2 words, DNA test. I mean, we can find this out, but the truth is she's had father issues for a lot of years. So I'm a big nay on this. I don't trust her. I think he's the kid.
Yeah, I think she's worried about her inheritance. Yeah, it's
Ooh,
sad,
wow,
right?
sad. I never thought about that.
I was trying to decide if mine are 2 words or 1. Bull! I can't say it. Yay or nay? Of course he is. Look at him. I mean, if you were walking down the street, you'd go, man, that guy looks like Frank Sinatra.
Yeah, it's the same thing. Wow, I think, well, I'm sure Frank would have liked to have gotten to know him.
Actually, I think Frank would have been a better journalist, but that aside.
Frank can always make the best decisions, though. I mean, go see Cannonball Run 2 sometimes.
Yeah.
Not a good decision. Anyway, music can die now. Control room. The Justice Department announcing today that they will not pursue contempt of Congress charges made against Lois Lerner when she refused to testify about her role in the IRS targeting scandal. Speaker of the House, John Boehner, initiated Lerner's prosecution after the scandal broke back in May of last year. So, is Lerner innocent? Yay or nay?
You won't know because they won't let any investigation go further. So that's why they should do it. Ironically, for many of these cases, if you really think the person is innocent, play it out.
Heather?
Right, this is
Yes, it is.
specifically her contempt of Congress with regard to the Fifth Amendment. Listen, she's contemptible, and I think she's in contempt of a lot of us. This technicality, they probably decided correctly on the legal issue, but we may still see charges against her on other things. So.
Heather's got it exactly right. You may still see charges against her on some other issues, but on this one, I agree. I think they got it right. I don't think that she did break the Fifth Amendment.
So this is a legal means thing. And
Yeah,
Might still be.
I'm a yay as well. You never see anybody being accused of Lois anymore. Yeah, Lois Lane, Lois Lerner. It's all about alliteration. Anyway, President Obama is set to speak at Hill Air Force Base in Utah on Friday, making South Dakota the only state in the country he hasn't visited as president. He did visit it as a candidate back in 2008. While South Dakota is not known for having oil, major universities, or even military bases, the Mount Rushmore state is having a silent economic boom with only a 3.7% jobless rate, the 3rd lowest in the country, more banks than New York, go figure, thriving manufacturing and biotech industries, and no state income tax. That's nice. Personal property tax, that's even nicer. Inventory tax, that's even nicer than nice. And no inheritance tax. Wow. Moving there tomorrow. Should the president make his next trip to South Dakota? Yay or nay?
Given the cost of a presidential trip and the fact that I'm betting not a lot of South Dakotans, I'm not judging, are eager to see this particular president, probably the answer is no. But if they want to have their ticket punched, go for it.
South Dakota is the state that brought you Tom Daschle, that brought you, what was the last one? It was a Democrat.
It was a Democrat
They
also.
elect Democrats.
They do.
Yeah.
They do. They didn't do well in the presidential, but
I
they
think
do.
he'll go. I think he'll go because he wants to, before he got all caught up in major issues in the country, he wanted to hit every state, and I think he'll get there. I really don't
I'll
care.
just say this, all those wonderful things that you get in South Dakota, there's another side. You have to live in South Dakota.
Is the weather terrible there?
It's harsh.
Right, because I know
I've never
it's
been.
the plains, right? And
There's 3.5 people there. That's no wonder they have a
Oh
3.5%
my God.
unemployment
Yeah, and we
rate.
wonder why people don't like people in New York and LA.
Exactly.
People who brought us the
For all
great
of those who
flyover.
are
As a
watching New York,
Midwesterner, I'm
There's New York,
offended.
there's LA, and there's all this in
For all of our
between.
viewers
right?
in South
my
Dakota,
Lord.
we love you.
I have a philosophy on this, okay? I think that in today's world, or it doesn't matter if it's cold because you could be warm at any point. In there, you could probably get a ton of property that
Yes.
you probably you couldn't get a studio for in New York, right? All that land and all that money, you're not giving away your taxes. You're almost guaranteed a job. DirecTV, you could watch your local sports team. It doesn't matter where you live anymore.
I
I
have
think is
one
the
word
thing.
for you.
Yeah,
Montana.
Montana, oh, Boise.
That's how you
All right, and that's our show for tonight, and we'd like to say hello to everybody in Montana. Thank you, panel, we appreciate it. I'm Joe Concha saying bye-bye, everybody.